Real Dad Talk, episode 73, Fatherhood.
Welcome everyone. Chris B here along with Rob K. How you doing, Rob?
What's up, Chris? Happy New Year's.
Happy New Year. I think it's still okay to say Happy New Year, right? I think it gives us like a couple weeks to do that.
I think we have another 2 weeks. I mean, if it hits February, we can't say it anymore.
It's all good. But what I tell you is this: I'm really happy about the guest we have today. Vic Aslanyan. He has a podcast called Mer Herosner, and in English that translates to Our Heroes. So thank you for coming on, Vic. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. Happy New Year, guys. Thank you for having me.
Welcome to the
Likewise,
show.
likewise.
Welcome to the show.
So tell us a little bit about Mer Herosner. You're a fellow podcaster. Tell us what's up.
Yeah. Mer Herosner. Mer Herosner is a podcast me and a good friend of mine, Mike Balian, started. It's a podcast about Armenian history, and it's in English. And we wanted to do it in English in order to reach a broader audience, and not just for Armenians, but also non-Armenians. And it's been an exciting ride. We're almost 3 years into it, and it's challenging because you have to do a lot of research to present the right information. But we also have a lot of intellectuals who join us, a lot of professors, and we just cover topics that has to relate with our history, which goes way back, like we usually try to say about 10,000 years, but some actually argue that it can go 12 to 15,000 years. But yeah, it's been really exciting, and I don't know, it was something that just popped out of nowhere. Me and Mike is a 3D artist. He does 3D sculpting for video games, movies, animation, and he had done this sculpture of Tigran the Great, and he showed it to me, and this idea sparked to take that and turn it into a sculpture. I don't know if you guys can see the sculptures I have right up there. Yeah. So, and we had this little business idea. We're like, why don't we, and the war hadn't started yet, but the 2020 war. And we were like, why don't we turn this into like marble sculptures? So he would come to my office a lot. We would sit there and talk, and for somehow the conversation would always lead to talking about history. And one day I just called him up and said, hey, how about we do a podcast? He's like, okay, who's gonna be doing this? I'm like, me and you. He's like, what? He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, dude. I'm like, we sit here and talk about history. Why don't we just record it and see what happens? So I kind of had to twist his arm and kind of, get him to do it. But what happened was we ended up meeting a gentleman by the name of Vahan Setyan, who is a researcher. He's done a lot of historical research. And we reached out to him and asked him if he would be our first guest. So we opened the first episode with him, and he has so much knowledge about our history, where we began, the birth of civilization, and Armenian Highlands. So from there, we did the first episode, we uploaded it, and within the first week, we had over 1,000 downloads, and we're like, "Wow,
that's awesome!"
Yeah, and we weren't expecting it, so we're like, okay, now we got to do episode 2.
So
What do we
funny that you're
do?
saying it, and congratulations on that. You mentioned having intellects and scholars.
Yeah.
So our podcast, does fatherhood have any intellects and scholars?
I think
I think so. I think so. There's some specialists about, just parenting in general. I don't know if it's specifically fathers, but
Yeah.
there's
So our idea was to create a platform where each father feels that they're an intellect and a
yeah,
scholar
yeah.
based on their experiences, because the truth is we're not intellects and scholars because children did not come with an owner's manual.
Chris, speak for yourself.
And oh, you got the owner's manual?
I got,
Please do
I,
share.
I got the second volume.
Yeah.
So, so my point, Vic, is that when we bring dads on the show, we know that not only is every father different, we know that every child is different, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Every dad has different experiences, and every child has different qualities. And the reason why we wanted to have you on is because, you know, the podcast you've chosen to do, that you created, was based on sharing the history and the culture of where you come from. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about Armenians, Assyrians, Hispanics, African American, whatever it is. The fact that you chose to embrace that background and share it with society, you know, the thought that came to my mind first was, as a father, um, what have you done to share that with your children? And given today's society, are the children receptive to hearing that?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one thing. My biggest fans are my kids. They listen to the podcast. Some stuff they might not understand, so they might ask me what was that about. But you know, the greatest thing was when as they're going through their stages of learning Armenian history in school, and they would come to me and be like, "Dad, like you talked about Kaj Vartan, or you talked about Tigran the Great. I remember you telling me about this guy and this queen." And it's such a great feeling that as they are learning these things in school, they kind of already know about it because they've heard me talk about it. But for me, you know, the most important thing about it is, and we try to tell our audience, and especially adults or parents who are listening to us, is try to have your kids listen to it as well. Sometimes we might talk about things that it might be hard for kids in elementary to understand, but I think from junior high or middle school now on, can grasp the information. And for me, I think it doesn't matter what culture you're part of. If you don't know your history, then you don't know your identity.
Absolutely.
It is so important. So, and what history does, if you go back and learn about everything that happened from your ancestors, it gives you a timeline of how you ended up being here, why you are Armenian, for example, what happened to your grandparents, their parents, so forth. And I think it's such a powerful tool to know who you are and to be able to identify with something, right? We all are proud to be Armenians, but one thing that none of us can ever live without is knowing that if, let's say, there was no Armenia, something we couldn't identify with. So the key is to make sure that our kids know about our history, where we come from, so they can preserve it for themselves, for their kids, their grandkids, so they can identify with something, right?
100%.
I think it's something that we need to, as parents, give the history of family history, origins, cultures. It doesn't matter what it is as we raise our kids, and they need to be educated about where they come from. It's not only with us, with you guys, with, I think, just generally, you know, we have such a rich history, and it does include some digging, right? Especially for your podcast, you guys do a lot of research, so you have to find out all this information that's not in your conventional books, you know. And
Yeah.
but overall, I want to get back into real dad talk. And what
Yeah.
is your dad stats? I'm talking about how many kids, what are the ages?
So I have three kids. My oldest will be 12 soon. She's in sixth grade. My middle one, she is turning 10 soon as well. She is in fourth grade. And then my youngest, my boy, he's in third grade. He's 8 going on 9. So I'm blessed with 3 beautiful, amazing kids, beautiful wife, amazing wife who without her, this would collapse. You know, it's teamwork. It's very difficult, especially the older they get. You know, with their activities and just that constant taken from here to there, you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's about, after school there is basketball
Yeah.
practices, dance practices. Chris knows it, you know it.
Yeah.
It's a very active day. The day starts at 6, the day ends at 9, coming home from whatever practice may be.
Yeah.
It's a lot different than, for example, what we're talking about, the traditional dads that we had.
Mhm.
Going to that, what was the relationship with you and your father growing up?
Um, you know, it was that typical Armenian that I think every Armenian our age can identify with. It wasn't like the way we are now, right? It was like that you always looked at your dad with a little bit of fear as well, that that's my dad. And my dad worked the minute we, immigrated to the United States. I can remember I was 9 years old. I think the third day he started working. So he was gone early, coming home late. So, but one thing my dad, when I started playing ice hockey, he was the one who would take me to my practice. Sometimes we would have practice like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, take me to my games. So there was that relationship. But I got, but there was still that distance. Like I said, I don't know how to describe it, but it's not the same how I am with my son right now. It's a different relationship.
What
Um,
is that difference?
I
Try to think of one experience where you can identify the difference between the way you and your dad were and you and your children.
I think with my son, I try to be more of a friend to him, but also a dad at the same time. I don't want him to be afraid of me. I want him to respect me. I want him to respect my word, my wisdom, what I'm teaching him. Obviously, if he gets out of line, he knows that dad will, uh, be mad at
Handle
him.
business.
Yeah, yeah, and he'll get punished. Uh, with my dad, it wasn't like that. There was always that fear, like that's my dad, and I better be good, or back then you get smacked if you weren't behaving,
Let me ask you this because it's gonna lead into something you said earlier. Do you think that, in your opinion, in your experience dealing with your father, that when you felt that fear, you're calling it, right?
Mhm.
That it kind of disrupted or stopped or limited any kind of free thinking or expression or communication with your father?
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
And
And
the
you know what it is, I can't blame him. Number one, like I said, he wasn't home because he was working. The other thing is, like, typically in Armenian families, especially Soviet Armenia, there wasn't that. I don't think I can think of any friend I have that had that. For example, I could be sitting watching TV and hugging my son at the same time. You didn't have that. There wasn't that embrace.
correct.
Um, and again, like I said, that I don't blame him for it. It's just how it was. Half the time I didn't see him because we were sleeping when he came home. But then what happened was, as I got older, one thing that the relationship I had with him was even in Armenia, I would go fishing with him. My dad would actually come pick me up from school in Armenia. We would go fishing. There was a river, um, and that's something we always had. So whenever he would go to fishing trips here, he would take me with him. And as I got older, we started connecting through that fishing, hanging out more, spending time together. So the relationship changed, but that only happened as I was an adult already.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, Chris,
hold on, Rob. Let me finish my thought. Sorry, 1 second. So, what I wanted to lead into on that was when you mentioned that, when I asked you, do the kids listen to the podcast so they know about it? And you said, they come ask you questions. And then when they hear about it in school, they're like, oh, I've already heard it, right?
Yeah.
So my father and my relationship did not have even what you described as far as fishing and so forth. It was even more limited. And the fact that you're talking about how, you know, we as dads, me, you, and Rob, we express affection now, right? And it's okay. It's okay to show how you feel and how you love
Yeah.
them and to kiss them and embrace them, not just on birthdays, New Year's, and Father's Day, you know?
Yeah.
So the the fact that your children now asking about the podcast, do you think that that opportunity invites the opportunity for them to be open and come to you and ask questions about other issues in life that they're going to experience other than the podcast because you provided that platform of that open door policy type of thing?
Well, I don't know if it was the podcast, but from day one, I've always been very. I mean, as they got a little bit older, that they can communicate with you. My thing is always, even with my wife, I would tell her I want my kids to be able to talk to me, to feel comfortable enough to always talk to me, no matter what it is. Even as my girls get older, and I know there's certain things that they feel more comfortable talking to their mom about, but I you learn from, you look at your parents, their relationship, how they raised you and everything. And that, it's funny, there was a quote I read the other day. It said something along the lines is, treat your kids, raise your kids in a way that they're either going to want to be like you, or they're going to try to be not like
Nothing
you.
like you.
Yeah. So kind of to take from that, um, I I always make them feel as comfortable as possible to know that they can talk to me about everything. That comes from the whole idea when I said I try to be a friend to them rather than just the dad. Yeah, they know I'm their dad, but like for example, my oldest, she will talk to me because of the long drives we have together. I'm the one who's taking her to her soccer practice or her soccer games. You know, she'll talk to me about everything, and that's how comfortable she feels. My middle one, she's a little bit not so much of a talker, so you have to try to get it out of her. So she's funny. She actually hates talking. If she hears other people talking to me, she's like, "Oof, stop talking." Um, my son, nope, my son, he's always dad, dad. I mean, to the point where every second it's like dad, 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 dad. You're like, give me a second, buddy. Um, but like I said, I always try to make them feel comfortable to know that we are family. You can share everything with us. You're not going to be in trouble, even if it's something bad. You're not going to be in trouble. When you're going to be in trouble is if you don't actually tell us about it. And then it becomes a bigger deal than it could have been if we had handled it right there and then. So, and it's been good. I mean, like I said, I can't think of a time where they haven't, let's say if they did something bad, they didn't share it with us and it became this big deal. They always come. They usually go to their mom first, but then they'll come to me.
Got it. Got
Yeah.
it. Rob, you
So
were saying something. I interrupted you. I apologize.
I was just gonna say it's like a generational thing, right? It's you know, I don't think my dad even respected me until I graduated college. So it was one of those things where my dad even didn't hang out with me until like 22, 23 years old, or give me that respect that, it's tough because this modern age, we want to embrace our kids. We want to show them that we care. We're here to listen. But at the same time, we have that old school in us as well. And I think there's a fine line, right? Between the middle. We can't lean too much this way. We can't lean too much that way, because if we lean too much this way, they're gonna be like, "Oh, you're my friend now." Or you lean too much that way, okay, you're being too strict of a parent. We gotta be.
yeah.
Well,
So
you're the
I
one
mean,
who's got the owner's manual. You tell me about it.
listen, the owner's manual comes with a price, but in
yeah,
general, it is challenging, and I think as fathers we are doing um above and beyond, with our careers, and spending time with our kids, taking to sports, whatever it may be. The chapter
yeah.
changed, which I embrace. But going back to the sports thing, taking the kids to sports or dance lessons after school, whatever it may be, 5 days a week, 4 days a week, we don't see the payoff now. What are your impressions on this? I mean, I get that, none of our kids. I don't think my kid's gonna go into the NBA, even through all the basketball practices he goes through. What is the positive aspects of us being there, even to the extent of 9 p.m. at night going to practices?
Well, first of all, never say never. You know,
Okay.
you never know. You
Yeah.
never know. But before I answer that question, I want to add something else to what we were talking about is, I don't know about you guys, but you know, the word "I love you" has, it's used more often in our generation of families, I think, towards our kids, and your kids towards me, or my kids towards me, when I drop them off to school. First thing is, "I love you, Dad. Have a great day." Same thing. Like, I don't think any of us had that with our parents, right?
Oh, you're a softie, Vic.
I'm just
I
saying, like,
love it. I love it.
so that is so important.
Yes, it
And you
is.
have to say that every day for them to understand that they are loved, that we care about them. And then when they say it back to you, and there's meaning behind it, So just wanted to add that part. But as far as sports, so my oldest is the first one who started sports. She was 5 years old. She saw her cousin play soccer, who's a year older than her, and she said, "Dad, I want to play soccer." I said, "Okay, sure." So I took her, and she fell in love with it, and she started playing. So she's 12, so it's almost 7 years she's been playing soccer, and I'm her biggest fan. And it was, you know, it is difficult, especially as they get advanced, in sports, and they start playing club. It could be basketball, soccer, volleyball, whatever it is. Um, and then after that, my son, then my daughter, especially with the school activities, they're playing sports in school as well. So you have this crazy schedule, right? They have practice at school, then from that they go to the other activity. They used to do dance before, but here's the thing. I know it's difficult for us, and I call myself the free Uber driver. I'm just taking my kids from one place to another. Uh, but it's keeping them busy. It's keeping them occupied. It's also good for their future, especially team sports. I'm a big believer in team sports. I think it's very important. I played hockey for a long time. I know what it does to you. And because if they don't, then what's going to happen? That free time that they have after they're done with their homework, whatever, they're usually going to be on their electronics. As they get older, you got to be worried about social media apps, things like that. So when you keep them occupied, I think it's healthy for them, their brain, physically. So I'm willing to, uh, sacrifice whatever you want to call it, my time, that crazy traffic drive, everything, to make sure that they don't fall on the wrong track. And my biggest fear as a parent, and this has happened especially with my oldest, is when their innocence is taken away too
Hmm.
soon. Where as a parent you try so hard to teach them the right things, and let them be kids, and then all of a sudden you put them out in the world, and because of somebody else's parenting or
They
lack
get
of
exposed to
parenting,
shit that you didn't want to.
yeah, and then now that innocence is gone, and there's no way for you to bring that back. So again, that is why I try to, not just because they love the sport, whatever, it's good, keep them busy, keep them occupied. we live in a different world now. It's the world's moving too fast. Information is too fast. I don't think our brains can handle it at this point. We have so much coming in a day, and it's not healthy for these kids.
So how do you, on that note, sorry, Rob, on that note about when, in the house, there's one set of culture, right? They go outside, they experience another culture, and then they bring that home, and then you hear or see that they've been exposed to that, right?
Yeah.
So what's your approach, because there's very different ones, on how you let your child know that, hey, that's not how it works in our house, and this is why. It's not the do as I say, not as I do, but it's if somebody jumps off the cliff, then you don't have to follow and jump off the cliff with
Yeah.
them.
No, I agree. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's about communication, right? So typically, especially with the girls, if they say they saw something that's, but not appropriate, or, it wasn't for their age, they'll typically go to my wife and talk to her about it. That's one thing. That's another thing that my wife does really well, is keep that open communication. You can talk to me no matter what it is. You can talk to me. And then typically the message will pass on to me, and depending on which child it is, we'll sit down and have an open communication with them and explain to them what they saw, what it was, and depending on what it is, try to explain it at the most PG version possible.
Sure.
And tell and explain to them that this is the world we live in. There are different types of people, there are different types of beliefs. If the subject has to do with religion or whatever it is, we explain to them why we don't do those things, why we don't believe in those things, because of who we are as Armenians, because of our culture, because of our religion. And if we have to break it down, because obviously the kids are always going to say why. So you have to be able to answer those whys, correct? So that's what we do in our household. And there's been cases like that where where you were like, man, the last thing I wanted to do is talk about this with my 10-year-old or 8-year-old, but they were exposed to it. So what
Right.
do? You can't ignore it. I'd rather for them to know what it is now, even though it's early for their age, but at least they now know. So if they see it again, they know how to respond to it.
Yeah,
Got it.
it's with everything going on with social media, Instagram, Facebook, whatever you want to say, at this point, it's all the information is out there, and going to that extent of what information is available to our kids, how do we safeguard them at this point? Because like you said, they'll ask you, Dad, for example, I heard about this, I saw this, and it happens to me every day. My daughter the other day, it had a question, is religious based off a post she saw. And I was kind of thrown back and kind of went in through the motions of explaining it. But it's very tough, is there restrictions, limits that we give our kids? We try to restrict all this social media, FaceTime, screen time as much as we can, but it is not an easy task.
Yeah.
How in your household, how do you approach this?
Social media, the only social media that we kind of allow would be YouTube, and older accounts are age restricted. And again, I'm not home most of the time, so whenever they're home with my wife, she's very strict about electronics, especially weekdays during school nights. The only time they can be on electronics is typically once they're done with all their homeworks, whatever,
Right.
maybe max an hour. Weekends, maybe a little bit more, but we're so busy on weekends with activities, so they don't have time. But social media, again, like I said, there's no way they're going to be on Instagram or any of those things. I mean, I'll try to keep them off of that as long as possible. Obviously, the older they get, it's a little bit difficult. especially in their teenage years, but those are the dangerous times,
Yeah.
I'm seeing
especially with girls.
I'm seeing this day and age. I see people from the school around my son's age, younger, older, they have Instagram accounts now. And for me, like for my kid, I go, I don't want that, and he knows that.
Yeah,
It's really tough because there's so much information that's literally being infused out there in these channels, and it's just like, how do we stop this information? Because, like you said, it only takes one time, one source to kind of set the kid off and have them thinking about something.
yeah, yeah.
And so, and that transparency you're talking about, where your kids come to you and they ask you, I think that's the only way to go, to be transparent. Your kid asks you a question, you can't hide around the bushes. You got to give them somewhat of an answer, so they're not later on, goes 5 years down the line, go, hey,
Yeah,
told me this, but it's not really true.
yeah. No,
Either that or you didn't let me speak and give my opinion.
Yeah,
And I just had to shut up.
I don't think you should lie to your kids when it comes to things like that. I think you should be open about it and explain it as the right way as much as possible. So it's not, again, it depends on the topic and the subject, what it is. But the other biggest problem is especially in schools, right? So you as a parent, you do everything possible to make sure that they're not exposed to things that are not for their age. But then there's parents who don't care. And it's happened to me multiple times with my oldest, where, like I said, she has school friends who have TikTok and have Instagram, and they're looking at this stuff during break. They're sitting next to each other, flipping through that, and my daughter's sitting there, and they're friends. She's seeing it, and she'll go, "How come I don't get to have TikTok, or how come I don't get to have Snapchat and this and that?" And I basically explained to her that it's not that you can't have it, it's just it's too early for you, because as much as you might put restrictions on these apps, something can slip out. They're not perfect, right? And that one thing that slips out can completely change the way they look at things, or take away their innocence, be exposed to something way too early. Because one thing, especially anything that has to do with sexual content, the minute a kid is exposed to sexual content, it's like their mind can't stop thinking about it, because they want to constantly know more. What was that?
It pours gas on that little flame that popped up.
Yeah. So imagine a 12. That's why you see girls on, and I mean, the biggest problem right now is what teenage girls on TikTok and Instagram, putting on makeup and trying to look older than they are, because they want to be cool and this and that. And what is that?
They
That's
want
all
attention. They want attention.
But that attention comes with sexuality, right? It's exposure towards, they want to be attractive. They want guys to look at them. Well, why does a 12-year-old need to do that? Why does a 12-year-old even know about that? That means they were exposed to it, and the way I see it is, if they were exposed to it at an early age, they thought, oh, this is the cool thing to do. So they started looking at it more and more and more and more, and then they wanted to become that way.
Yeah, and at that age, they don't have, well, this is my opinion. I'm not a psychiatrist, a psychologist, but at that age, their mind has not developed sufficiently. They have not had life experiences sufficiently to be able to piece together what to do with that information that's coming in. I was going to keep it lighthearted and say, okay, what's your thoughts on at what age to allow your children to have a cell phone? But then you shot straight into it and saying that your daughter's classmates during school, they're flipping through. And how old's your daughter?
She'll be 12 soon.
12-year-olds. So you already got 12-year-olds at school with cell phones going through stuff that some parents may not want to have their children exposed to.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, so for example, my 12-year-old got a phone this earlier this year, and the reason we got her a phone was because of the fact that there are times where we drop her off at places as far as sports activities, and then I'm going, or the mom will drop her off, and then I'm going to go. We need to be able to communicate with her.
Sure.
And at this point, it's like we can't have her use her coach's phone or this. It just doesn't work, you know. But she knew that when we got her phone, there was going to be limitations on it. She can't download an app without my approval. She can't do this. She can't do that. Everything's restricted. If she needs to do anything on that phone that has to do with, like I said, gaining access to anything, I have to allow it. And you guys know all that stuff. All the phones have those features, right? As a parent. But it's funny, we went back and forth, and we even had a little argument about it with my wife. It's like, you know, we really didn't want to, but it came to the point where life just puts you in that situation where you're
Sure.
like, okay, this is a gadget that we need to get for her because it's also for safety reasons, you know. But
her friends have it too, right? Her friends have a cell phone.
Oh yeah.
On the
yeah, but
class,
her friends had a cell phone. I mean, again, we joined this school when she was in fourth grade. I mean, from fourth grade, her friends had phones, the latest iPhone, you know, and that's the thing. I always go, why does your kid need an iPhone 15 Pro? Like, what are they doing?
give them the
Like,
iPhone 8. Give them the
yeah, my kid has the smallest, what is it, the iPhone 12 is the tiny iPhone, you know, there's no need for that. They'll still take pictures, they'll still do what it needs to do. But some people, like, I think also culturally, we are very materialistic. And it's always keeping up with the Joneses, you know. You gotta have the best of the best, the biggest house, the best car, the best phone. And a lot of parents, instead of teaching their kids to be, first of all, to understand finance, to understand how money works, where money comes from, they just give them, and you know, shower them with uh expensive, unnecessary, materialistic things, and these kids think that's how life works.
Mm-hmm.
So later on in life, what happens? These kids don't know what work ethic is. They don't know what money is worth. And we're going to throw them into the real world at 18, 20 years old. And I agree with you. It's one of those things where you got to teach them the value of money. You just can't keep throwing objects, sneakers, whatever it may be, in their faces,
Yeah,
because there has to be enough, you know, like we're all old school, right? And I'm not saying old school is generally correct, but old school is, you know, you learn about money, what money is worth. We didn't get everything that we wanted. We had to work hard for it. So it's a tough generation, especially we're talking about cell phones. I didn't want to get it was my son's birthday last year, and all his friends already had cell phones. And I was the last, I told my wife, I was like, I do not want to get this. Once we get this kid's going to change. And what happened? He did change. His moment the phone was delivered, yeah, you know, you notice it. And I would say, hey, you know, I'm gonna take this away. You know, pissed off at me, Dad, why are you doing this? Like, oh, listen, you're not acting accordingly. And before a cell phone, you were not acting like this. So it's very tough because, like you said, we try to restrict the YouTube, restrict all the things on the phone, like, you know, but that phone is already creating what is it?
A distraction.
A distraction, but also like a profile of that person. So once that profile of that person is created on the cell phone, let's say they create an Instagram account, already they're going to be marketed things that they've been looking at. So
Oh,
unfortunately,
good point.
the unfortunate part is it's gonna follow them regardless. That avatar that's created of, let's say, your child, and your child likes this kind of things, you know, shoes, sneakers, this whatever may be, that's gonna follow them. So all the marketing, all those is gonna be tracked. And at the end of the day, we don't know what kind of ads our kids are gonna be served. We don't know what kind of profiles are gonna be suggested their way. So I kind of get nervous about that because as much as we can lock it in, hone it in to control them. There's ways like Vic, you're saying, there's ways that they can infiltrate in and get wrong information. And once they see that wrong piece of information, we're done.
Great
Yeah,
point.
yeah. It's very dangerous. I mean, listen, I don't know about you guys, but I always try to use a reward system. If they want something, let's say my son comes to me, he's a big basketball fan, and be like, Dad, I want LeBron Nikes. Okay, well, why do you deserve them? What have you done? Show me why you need to have those. Or if you want it, then you need to get better grades. You have to prove to me that you can do this, or whatever it is. I try to create a reward system for them that, hey, if you do this, then you will get this. But I always talk to them about money, about where money comes from, how money works, how dad works sometimes 12 hours a day. There's a reason for that. That all this stuff you guys have is because of dad working hard. You can't just, money doesn't grow on tree. Because my son, when he was younger, obviously he didn't understand the concept of money and numbers and this and that. And he would be like, Dad, how come you don't buy a Lamborghini or this? Like, he doesn't understand. I'll be like, well, Lamborghini costs $200,000. There's no reason for me to spend $200,000 on a Lamborghini. So, but he has friends whose dads have exotic cars and this and that. I'm like, that's great. That's what they wanted to do. Good for them. But again, as he got older, and by the way, he's really good at math, he started understanding what I would tell him, like how much things cost, how it works. I've actually sat down and explained to my kids how my business works, how dad earns income. And sometimes it might be a good month, sometimes it might be a bad month, but I want them to understand that kids sometimes have this imagination that money's just coming from somewhere, right? They don't understand. I want them to know from an early age that the reason you guys have these things, the reason we can afford these things, is because dad is
Sure.
working. Obviously, mom is a stay-at-home mom, and that's work itself. And I think that's harder than what any of us dads do. But yeah, I think if you can teach your kids finances and how money works at the earliest possible age, I think they will grow up to be better humans, understanding how to manage their own finances, especially when they start working. Back to the kids who are always given all this stuff thrown at them, if they're lucky and somehow that income is transferred to them and they continue their life lavishly like that, I guess that's luck. But most of the time, what happens to these kids, and I have a friend like that who should stay nameless, who was one of those kids that everything was thrown at them, and he's our age, and he
That's
never made it to himself because he never had the chance to learn how to be financially responsible, or to even have a career in anything.
Got it. Rob, I want to always keep this going, but I want to get your final thoughts, and then Vic, I want to get your final thoughts. And the idea is that we always exchange opinions and on the certain topics we talk about, but we want to leave a little nugget for our listeners, and what we'd like to share with them. So, Rob, what are your thoughts about tonight?
Well, we have a lot of aspects that we covered, but number one is the kids understanding overall what the parents go through, and what you just touched upon. We
Appreciation.
appreciation. We come from parents that worked very hard, came to this country, working their butts off just to making living, and even for me, my parents were like, I was a landscaper for the house. I cleaned the house. Whatever my parents asked from me, I did for them. And I want that appreciation and that respect from our kids, my kids, because granted, this is a new world, but I want to keep the old world intact, especially in our household. Uh, we're nobodies. I'm a nobody. I'm just saying that I want my family, my two kids, to embrace what we have, and for the future, not have money on the pedestal, have family surrounding you, have love surrounding you. You mentioned love, Vic, which is a beautiful thing. They gotta know what it's like to be loved, to be hugged, because we didn't have that. My dad, I was lucky if I heard love you. It's not a bad thing. My dad is a great man. But it was a whole different time. And so I think we need that hybrid. We need to bring that love in, but at the same time have that respect and that hard work incorporated. And if we can make it happen, that'd be fantastic. But as of now, it's a lot of work, and I all of us could agree that it takes a village sometimes to raise a child. I have my in-laws, I have my parents, I have our aunts and uncles. Everyone helps out. So in a day and age like this, I embrace family, I embrace love, and it is a great message. And also I embrace our past, our culture. So that's my outlook on all this.
I love it. Vic, your thoughts?
I mean, Rob kind of said it perfectly, but just to add to it, like, I mean, values, family values is so important. And like you said, keeping our culture within our families. And again, this is not just about Armenians, anybody. You could be of Latin descent, you could be of any, if you have culture, try to keep it in your family, because every culture comes with its own traditions. It's a beautiful thing. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Like, I love our Armenian traditions. I love the fact that there are certain things we do in a different way, and we try to make sure we preserve that. And love is everything. You have to show love to your
Yes.
kids, and make sure they show love. I think if you show love to them, they will show. I mean, kids, they're naturally just love you because you're their parents, right? But that balancing act, like Rob said, it's really difficult, but you just have to figure out how to make sure that you don't uh, allow them to cross that line where all of a sudden you lose your parent authority, right? So, but listen, like you said, parenting is a learning experience. Sometimes I still think, how am I a parent? I still remember being in my 20s. But yeah, I think the takeaway from it is that just keep doing what you guys are doing, and just try to be good humans, try to be good parents, and teach your kids to be good humans.
Real dad talk.